She was 31 years old. She drove a white Dodge pickup with a cracked side mirror and a pine tree air freshener she kept replacing because the desert dried them out in 2 weeks. On the morning of September 14th, 1994, she clocked out of her shift at the Maricopa County Records Office, stopped for gas at the Chevron on Southern Avenue, and was never seen alive again. That is not a story about a woman who disappeared. That is a story about a woman whose disappearance was handed to 3 different detectives over 30 years, and 3 times in 3 different decades. The right answer was sitting in the same evidence box they all signed off on. It would take a cold case unit, a retired highway patrolman who couldn't stop thinking about it, and a piece of technology that didn't exist when Linda Castile was alive to finally give her a name that justice could reach. But before any of that, you have to go back to the Arizona that Linda Castile called home. Because to understand what was lost, you first have to understand who she was. Maricopa County in 1994 was not the sprawling metro area it would become. The suburbs that now stretch from Chandler to Surprise were mostly cotton fields then, irrigated and flat, broken up by 2-lane roads, and the kind of small communities that had more roosters than stoplights. Chandler itself had a population just under 100,000, large enough to have a mall, small enough that you still recognized faces at the post office. The heat was serious, and the people were straightforward. Neighbors kept their porch lights on for each other. Kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. Everybody knew the dispatcher at the sheriff's department by first name. Linda Castile had lived in Arizona her whole life. She'd grown up in Mesa, the third of 5 children, in a house with a swamp cooler that rattled every August, and a mother who made tamales at Christmas that people still talked about at family reunions years later. She'd gotten her associate's degree from Mesa Community College in 1986, worked briefly at a title company, then spent the last 7 years as a records technician for the county. She was good at the job. She had a memory that people teased her about. She could recall case numbers the way other people remembered song lyrics, cross-referencing old files without touching a computer. Her supervisor, a soft-spoken woman named Bernice Orozco, would later say Linda could find a misfiled record the way a dog finds a bone. She always knew where things were. Linda had a son. His name was Daniel, and he was 9 years old that September. He collected baseball cards and had recently decided he wanted to be a meteorologist after watching a documentary about tornadoes. Linda put a barometer on his bedroom wall. She'd saved up 3 months of tip money from her weekend waitressing shifts at the Roadrunner Diner to pay for it. She kept a photo of the 2 of them in a wooden frame on her desk at the county office. Daniel at 6 years old, wearing a shirt 2 sizes too big, squinting into the sun in front of the Grand Canyon. She told her co-workers she took him there for his birthday because she wanted him to understand that Arizona was bigger than wherever he happened to be standing. That was the kind of woman Linda Castile was. She thought in futures. Her last normal morning is documented. At 6:48 a.m., she swiped her badge at the county records office on West Jefferson. She bought a coffee from the break room machine. Black, no sugar, same as always. She told her co-worker Patrice she was thinking of taking Daniel to the state fair on Saturday if she could get the afternoon off. At 7:02, she was at her desk. She worked her full shift. She clocked out at 3:31 p.m., said goodbye to Bernice, and walked to the parking lot. That was the last time anyone at the county office saw her. The Chevron on Southern Avenue logged Linda's card transaction at 3:54 p.m. She pumped $11.40 in regular. The attendant, a teenager named Marcus Webb, remembered her because she smiled and said the heat was finally starting to break. He thought that was funny because it was still 94 degrees. She got back in the white Dodge and pulled out heading east. Nobody saw her after that. Daniel was at his grandmother's house that afternoon. When Linda hadn't arrived by 6 o'clock, her mother assumed traffic. By 7, she called Linda's apartment. By 8, she called the non-emergency line. The deputy who took the call told her Linda probably just stopped somewhere. Adults don't go missing like that. Call back in the morning if she still hadn't shown up. Her mother called back at 6 a.m. The white Dodge was found on September 17th, 3 days later. It was parked in a dirt turnout off State Route 87, about 14 miles east of the Chevron. The engine was cold. The keys were on the seat. The pine tree air freshener was still hanging from the mirror. Linda's purse was in the footwell on the passenger side. Inside, her wallet, her county badge, $43 in cash, and a birthday card she'd already addressed to Daniel. His birthday was 2 weeks away. She'd written inside it. She'd already signed it. The first detective on the case was a man named Hector Fuentes. He was experienced, thorough, and dealing with a department that was quietly overwhelmed. 1994 was a complicated year in Maricopa County. He canvassed the highway. He interviewed Marcus Webb. He pulled Linda's phone records and her bank records and found nothing unusual. He noted one thing in his report that would later seem significant. 0.6 of a mile from where the Dodge was parked, there was a property, a small horse operation with a chain-link fence and a hand-painted sign, owned by a man named Roy Cutter. Fuentes knocked on the door. Roy Cutter said he hadn't seen anything. Fuentes noted the interview. He moved on. He had no body. He had no forensic evidence. He had a parked car and a woman who was gone. The case went cold in 1996. Linda's family kept looking. Her sister Rosalinda made flyers every year on September 14th, Linda's last day, and drove the same 14 miles of Route 87, distributing them to gas stations and feed stores. Daniel, who'd been 9 years old when his mother vanished, was 16 when he started driving that road himself. He didn't know what he was looking for. He just couldn't stop. Their grandmother kept Linda's photo on the mantel and lit a candle next to it every Sunday. The barometer Daniel's mother had bought him was still on his bedroom wall. He never took it down. In 1999, a detective named Sandra Morales reopened the file as part of a county initiative to review unresolved missing persons cases. She was methodical and careful. She requested a new round of records, including property records for the immediate area around where the Dodge had been found. Roy Cutter's name came up again. He'd sold the horse property in 1997 and moved to Nevada. Morales made a note. She contacted the Nevada address. Roy Cutter was cooperative, said he barely remembered the original interview, said he hadn't seen anything that week in 1994. His alibi for that September was partial but not impossible. No charges, no new leads. The file went back in the box. By 2003, Detective third-grade James Elway had picked it up as part of a broader review. He was newer, younger, and the digital age had opened some doors that hadn't existed for Fuentes or Morales. He ran Roy Cutter's name through every database available to him. Cutter had a 1988 assault charge in Yuma that had been pleaded down to disorderly conduct. Nothing else. Elway spent 4 months on the file. He submitted a DNA collection request for Roy Cutter on the basis of the circumstantial proximity. Cutter declined. Elway didn't have enough for a warrant. The case went back in the box. 3 detectives, 3 decades. Same box, same name in the margins. The house next door to Linda's old apartment had been bought and sold 4 times by now. Daniel Castile had finished a degree in environmental science at ASU. He still drove Route 87 on September 14th every year. He'd stopped expecting to find anything. He drove it because she had. By 2019, Linda Castile's case file had lived in the Maricopa County Sheriff's Cold Case Unit for 11 years without being formally assigned to anyone. The unit had 2 full-time investigators and a backlog that filled 2 rooms. But in the summer of that year, a retired highway patrol officer named Dennis Arredondo requested access to 12 unresolved missing persons cases from the 1990s, specifically cases with abandoned vehicles and no recovered remains. He wasn't on payroll. He was volunteering. He'd done it twice before in neighboring counties and helped close one case through a combination of property record cross-referencing and what he called asking questions that felt too obvious to ask the first time. The cold case supervisor, Lieutenant Faye Corrigan, gave him supervised access and a desk near the copier. Linda's file was the 4th one he read. He read it in one sitting. He read it again the next morning. Then he spent 2 weeks driving the 14 miles of Route 87 with a county property map printed at a gas station. He was looking for something Hector Fuentes had noted, and all 3 detectives had seen, but none of them had fully pursued: the chain-link fence, the horse property, Roy Cutter. What Arredondo noticed was not in the original report. It was in the property map. Roy Cutter's land in 1994 included not just the main parcel, the horse operation at the front, but a secondary parcel, 12 acres behind it, registered separately under a limited liability company that had been dissolved in 1996. That rear parcel was accessible from a separate unpaved road. The road intersected Route 87 approximately 6/10 of a mile from where Linda's truck had been found. Arredondo requested the dissolved LLC records. They came back in 3 weeks. The registered agent on the LLC, Roy Cutter. He took everything to Lieutenant Corrigan. If you want us to keep bringing cases like Linda Castile's out of those filing rooms and back into the light, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Your support is what makes it possible to keep going. Now let's get back to what Dennis Arredondo found next. What happened next is a matter of public record, though the process took longer than anyone wanted it to. Arredondo and Corrigan took the LLC documentation to the county prosecutor's office in the fall of 2019. The secondary parcel, they argued, had never been searched, not in 1994, not in 1999, not in 2003. All 3 detectives had canvassed the main property. Nobody had gone to the back. The prosecutor agreed it was enough to request a court-authorized ground survey. The survey happened over 3 days in February 2020. Ground-penetrating radar, equipment that bounces radio waves through soil to detect anomalies below the surface, the same technology used by archaeologists to find buried structures without digging, identified a disturbance in the earth on the north side of the rear parcel. An area approximately 6 feet by 3 feet, approximately 4 feet down. The excavation took 1 day. Linda Castile had been buried there for 25 years. Forensic identification was confirmed through dental records. It took 11 days. When Lieutenant Corrigan made the call to Linda's family, she said that Daniel Castile was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I need to tell my grandmother before she sees it anywhere." His grandmother was 81 years old. She'd kept the candle burning on the mantle for 25 years. Roy Cutter was located in Henderson, Nevada. He was 67 years old. He'd worked in property management since leaving Arizona. His neighbors described him as quiet, self-contained, the kind of man who kept his porch tidy and didn't attend block parties. Nobody who knew him would have recognized the name from a cold case file. Nobody had any reason to. DNA from the grave site, biological material recovered during excavation and analyzed at the Arizona Department of Public Safety Crime Lab, was compared against a reference sample law enforcement obtained through a discarded coffee cup from a cafe in Henderson. The process of obtaining the sample without Cutter's knowledge was lawful and documented. The lab returned a match in 6 weeks. Roy Cutter was arrested on March 4, 2021, at his apartment in Henderson. Court records state that he was taken without incident. He said nothing when they read him the charges. His attorney entered a plea of not guilty. At trial the following year, prosecutors presented the DNA evidence, the property records, the ground-penetrating radar findings, and something that had been in the original 1994 case file all along. Something that 3 detectives had read and flagged and moved past. Marcus Webb, the gas station attendant who had spoken with Linda at 3:54 p.m. on September 14, 1994, had noted in his original statement that Linda's truck had already been stopped once before she pulled into the Chevron. He'd seen it from the bay window. A dark-colored utility truck had pulled alongside her at the intersection half a block away. The 2 vehicles had sat there for what felt like almost a minute. Then the utility truck drove on. Then Linda pulled in. Webb had noted it because it seemed odd, like they might know each other, or like the utility truck was giving her directions. The dark-colored utility truck registered to Roy Cutter in 1994 was a green Ford F-250. That detail had been in the file since October 1994. 3 detectives had read it. None of them had cross-referenced the vehicle description against Cutter's registration. Roy Cutter was convicted of first-degree murder on October 14, 2022. He was sentenced to life without parole. He made no statement at sentencing. Daniel Castile was 37 years old when the verdict came in. He sat in the courtroom in a gray button-down shirt. He'd taken the day off from his job with the State Environmental Agency. People who saw him afterward said he didn't look relieved so much as finished. The way a person looks when something they've been carrying for a very long time is finally allowed to be set down. In a statement released through the family's attorney, Daniel wrote, "My mother was a woman who kept people's records straight. She knew where everything was. It took us 27 years to find where she was, but we found her. And now everybody knows." Linda Castile's case triggered a formal review of all property searches conducted during missing persons investigations in Maricopa County. Investigators noted that the secondary parcel oversight was not unique to this case. Cross-parcel registration through LLCs had been a gap in standard canvassing protocols. The review resulted in updated training requirements for all cold case detectives in the county. 3 additional cold cases are currently being re-examined under the new protocols. Linda was buried near Mesa, in the same cemetery as her mother, who passed away in 2018 and never learned the answer. Daniel put a barometer on the headstone. Not a real one, a drawing he'd made, a small laminated card tucked into the flowers. She had wanted him to understand that Arizona was bigger than wherever he happened to be standing. He never forgot that. Justice came for Linda Castile after 27 years. Not because the truth was hidden, it was in the box the whole time. Because nobody had asked what was behind the fence. Think about what this case reveals. 3 trained investigators, over 3 decades, each read the same detail in a witness statement. A green truck, an intersection, a pause that lasted almost a minute, and none of them followed it to its end. Was that a failure of resources? A failure of protocol? Or is it something harder to name? The way cases acquire a weight of their own. The way a file that has been reviewed twice already carries the invisible implication that the obvious things have already been checked. And what does it mean that Roy Cutter lived for 27 years as a neighbor, a property manager, a man who kept his porch tidy, while Linda Castile's 9-year-old son drove a desert highway every September looking for his mother. I want to know what you think. Did the system fail Linda Castile, or did it eventually work? What's the detail from this case that you can't stop thinking about? And what should be required differently in every missing persons investigation so that no secondary parcel, no LLC, no quiet footnote in a witness statement goes unchecked? Justice found Linda Castile after 27 years. Cases like hers are why this channel exists, because truth doesn't expire, even when cases go cold. If you believe that too, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. More solved cold cases are waiting in the description below. Thank you for watching.